There are fewer than 1,400 people in America with top-secret SCI clearance at the executive level. Individuals who brief presidents, coordinate with intelligence agencies, and know secrets that could literally change the course of history. These are people who've been vetted by every alphabet agency you can name, whose backgrounds have been investigated more thoroughly than most criminals, who carry credentials that can open doors to the most secure facilities in the country. On March 8, 2024, one of those 1,400 people was handcuffed on a public street and detained for over an hour while bystanders filmed. His credentials were examined and dismissed as probably fake. His attempts to verify his identity through official channels were ignored. And by the time he was released, with no charges, no apology, just a casual, "You're free to go," the video had already gone viral, sparking a civil rights firestorm that would expose systemic problems in policing, racism in law enforcement, and a culture where power and prejudice collide with devastating consequences. This is the story of Dr. Raymond Cross and how one illegal detention revealed cracks in the very foundation of justice in America. Dr. Raymond Cross wasn't a household name, and that's exactly how he preferred it. At 52 years old, he'd spent nearly 3 decades in national security, working his way from junior analyst to deputy assistant secretary for counterterrorism strategy at the Department of Homeland Security. His resume was classified, his work was classified, and most Americans had no idea people like him even existed. But those who did know Raymond Cross knew him as brilliant, meticulous, and unflappable. He'd coordinated responses to 3 major terrorist threats. He'd testified before classified congressional committees. He'd sat in the Situation Room during national crises. And he'd never, in 28 years of government service, been detained by police. March 8th was supposed to be a rare day off. Raymond had taken his 16-year-old son, Jordan, to a community basketball tournament in Northeast D.C., one of those father-son bonding moments that his demanding job made too infrequent. Jordan was playing in the semifinals. Raymond was standing on the sideline, wearing jeans and a Howard University hoodie, cheering for his son's team. The game ended at 3:47 p.m. Jordan's team won. Raymond was congratulating his son when 2 Metropolitan Police Department officers approached the court. According to their later report, they were responding to a disturbance in the area, though number 911 call matching that description would ever be found in official records. What happened next was captured on at least 6 different cell phones. The composite footage, pieced together from multiple angles, tells a story that becomes more disturbing with each viewing. Officer Michael Brennan approaches Raymond directly. "Sir, we need to talk to you." Raymond, still celebrating with Jordan, turns with a smile. "Is there a problem, officer? We've had reports of suspicious activity. I need to see some identification." Here's where Raymond makes his first mistake, though it shouldn't be a mistake. He assumes this is a reasonable request that will be quickly resolved. He reaches for his wallet and produces not 1, not 2, but 3 forms of identification: his driver's license, his DHS credentials with his photo and clearance level clearly marked, and a special federal ID card used for accessing secure facilities. "I'm Dr. Raymond Cross, Deputy Assistant Secretary at the Department of Homeland Security," he says calmly. "I'm here watching my son play basketball. Is there something specific I can help you with?" Officer Brennan takes the credentials, but barely glances at them. These could be fake. Raymond's expression shifts. The footage captures the exact moment confusion becomes concern. "Officer, those are federal credentials. You can verify them with a single phone call to the DHS Operations Center. The number is right there on the card." "Sir, I need you to place your hands on your head." "On what basis?" Raymond's voice remains calm, but you can hear the edge creeping in. This is a man who's negotiated with foreign intelligence agencies, who's faced down actual threats to national security. But he's also a black man in America, and he knows exactly what's happening. Officer Brennan's partner, Officer Sarah Chun, positions herself behind Raymond. "Sir, place your hands on your head, or you will be detained." Jordan's voice cuts through the tension. "Dad?" The teenager's confusion is palpable. He's just won a basketball game. His father is being treated like a criminal. Nothing makes sense. Raymond does what countless black men have learned to do in situations like this. He complies. Hands on his head. Movement slow. Voice steady. "Jordan, it's okay. There's been a misunderstanding. Stay calm." But it's not a misunderstanding. And it's definitely not okay. The pat-down is aggressive. Raymond is searched in front of his son, in front of the other players, in front of coaches and parents who just moments ago were celebrating a basketball game. His wallet, phone, and keys are confiscated. His federal credentials are handed to a sergeant who's arrived as backup. Sergeant David Morrison examines the credentials for less than 10 seconds before announcing, "We'll need to verify these downtown." "You can verify them right here," Raymond says, his composure starting to crack. There's a 24-hour verification line specifically for situations like this. "If you're questioning my credentials, protocol requires you to contact federal authorities immediately." Morrison's response reveals everything about what's really happening. "I don't take orders from you, sir. This isn't about verification. It's about authority. It's about an elite federal official, a black elite federal official, being put in his place by street cops who feel their power being challenged." Raymond is handcuffed. Not flex cuffs or loose restraints. Full metal handcuffs, tightened to the point where they leave marks on his wrists. And then, in front of his teenage son, he's walked to a patrol car while bystanders' phones capture every moment. Jordan is crying now. A coach tries to console him. Another parent is already calling her lawyer friend. And Raymond, sitting in the back of that patrol car, is thinking about all the times he's advised on civil liberties, on proper law enforcement procedures, on the balance between security and rights, and wondering how those principles mean nothing when you're a black man in handcuffs. The next 74 minutes would expose every failure in a system that's supposed to protect citizens while giving police the tools to maintain public safety. Instead, it revealed a series of conscious decisions to escalate rather than de-escalate, to assert power rather than seek truth. At the police station, Raymond requests, for the fourth time, that someone contact DHS to verify his identity. The request is logged but not acted upon. Instead, he's fingerprinted. His photo is taken. He's placed in a holding cell typically reserved for suspects awaiting processing. Meanwhile, the video footage is spreading across social media at exponential speed. A parent who'd been at the basketball game posts the first clip at 4:12 p.m. with the caption, "They just arrested someone's dad at a kid's basketball game." This is insane. Within 20 minutes, it has 15,000 views. Within an hour, it's been shared by local news outlets. Within 2 hours, national civil rights organizations are calling for an investigation. But inside the police station, Raymond is effectively invisible. No one with authority will speak to him. The desk sergeant who processed him claims he's waiting for verification. The detective on duty says he's looking into it. The shift commander is mysteriously unavailable. What they don't know, what they couldn't have anticipated, is that Raymond's disappearance has triggered protocols at DHS. When a senior official's federal credentials are confiscated by local police, automatic notifications go out to multiple departments. When that official doesn't check in within 30 minutes, those notifications escalate. When an hour passes with no contact, federal authorities start making phone calls. At 4:53 p.m., 66 minutes after Raymond's detention, a call comes into the police station from DHS headquarters. The conversation, later obtained through FOIA requests, is illuminating. DHS Operations Center. This is the DHS Operations Center calling to verify the status of Deputy Assistant Secretary Raymond Cross. "We understand he's in your custody." Desk Sergeant. Who? Operations Center, Dr. Raymond Cross. Senior official with top secret/SCI clearance. "Your officers detained him at approximately 3:50 p.m. and confiscated his federal credentials. We need immediate confirmation of his status and location." There's a long pause on the recording. Desk Sergeant. Let me check on that." 8 minutes later, 74 minutes after the initial detention, Raymond is released. No citation, no charges, no arrest record. Just a perfunctory, "You're free to go," and his belongings returned in a plastic bag. The officers who detained him are nowhere to be seen. The sergeant who processed him avoids eye contact. And Raymond walks out of that police station to find Jordan sitting in the lobby with the basketball coach, his face puffy from crying, his tournament victory completely overshadowed by watching his father be treated like a criminal. The ride home is quiet. Jordan stares out the window. Raymond tries to process what just happened, not just the detention, but the systematic disregard for his credentials, for his rights, for his dignity. And both of them are trying to understand how a day that started with basketball ended with handcuffs. But the story doesn't end there. Because that evening, Raymond does something that will transform this from a personal grievance into a national conversation about civil rights, police accountability, and systemic racism. He calls his attorney, and then he calls the press. The press conference on March 11th, 3 days after the detention, was standing room only. Raymond sat at a table flanked by his attorney and representatives from 3 civil rights organizations. Jordan sat in the front row, his presence a silent reminder of what this case was really about: a son watching his father's dignity stripped away by the very system meant to protect it. Raymond's opening statement was measured, professional, and devastating. I have spent 28 years protecting this country. I have advised 3 administrations on matters of national security. I hold one of the highest security clearances available to any American citizen. I have been vetted, investigated, and trusted with secrets that most people will never know exist. And yet, on March 8th, while watching my son play basketball, I was detained, handcuffed, and held for over an hour despite presenting valid federal credentials, because 3 police officers decided that those credentials looked fake. Let me be absolutely clear. This was not a case of mistaken identity. This was not overzealous policing. This was racial profiling, plain and simple. Those officers saw a black man in a hoodie at a community basketball game and decided I was suspicious. When I presented credentials proving who I was, they dismissed them without verification because accepting them would have meant admitting their initial judgment was wrong. And that judgment was based entirely on the color of my skin. The questions from reporters were immediate and pointed. Had he filed a complaint? Yes. Was he seeking legal action? His attorney indicated that all options were being considered. What did he want to happen? Raymond's answer to that last question would become the rallying cry for the civil rights movement that followed. I want accountability. I want these officers held responsible for violating my civil rights. But more than that, I want systemic change. Because if this can happen to me, someone with institutional power, legal knowledge, and resources to fight back, imagine what happens every single day to people who don't have those advantages. This isn't about me. This is about a system that allows officers to detain citizens based on racial bias, ignore evidence that contradicts their assumptions, and face zero consequences for those actions. The media coverage was immediate and intense. But what really accelerated the story into a national conversation was something no one expected. Other victims started coming forward. Within 48 hours of Raymond's press conference, 23 other individuals contacted civil rights organizations with similar stories. People detained in that same police district, their credentials ignored or dismissed, held for extended periods without charges. And the pattern was unmistakable. 21 of those 23 individuals were Black or Latino. All were professionals. Several had government credentials. And not one of them had been given a legitimate explanation for their detention. A Georgetown law professor who'd been stopped while jogging and held for 90 minutes despite showing his university ID and faculty credentials. A medical doctor detained outside her own hospital after a night shift, her medical license dismissed as probably fake. A Marine veteran stopped while waiting for his daughter outside a library, his military ID confiscated and examined for verification. That never occurred. Each story added fuel to the fire. Each one demonstrated that Raymond's experience wasn't an isolated incident, but evidence of a pattern. And each one made it harder for the police department to dismiss this as a simple mistake. The Metropolitan Police Department's initial response was textbook damage control. We take all complaints seriously and are conducting a thorough investigation into the incident involving Dr. Cross. Our officers followed standard procedures for credential verification. But that statement fell apart within 24 hours when investigative journalists obtained the dispatch recordings. There was no disturbance call. There was no legitimate reason for officers to approach Raymond in the first place. And when they did approach him, they had made no attempt to verify his credentials through proper channels that exist specifically for situations like this. The Department of Justice announced a civil rights investigation. The Department of Homeland Security issued a scathing statement about the treatment of one of its senior officials. Members of Congress called for hearings, and activists organized protests that drew thousands to the streets, chanting, "Credentials don't matter when you're Black, and if he's not safe, none of us are safe." But the moment that truly crystallized public opinion came from an unexpected source. Retired four-star General Marcus Thompson, former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. In a Washington Post op-ed titled, "When Badges Trump Justice," he wrote, "Raymond Cross has briefed me on matters of national security. I have trusted him with information that could affect the lives of thousands of American military personnel. The President of the United States has trusted him to help keep this nation safe." And yet, 3 police officers in Washington, D.C. decided their judgment was superior to decades of federal vetting, years of distinguished service, and multiple forms of official identification. This isn't just about one man's dignity. It's about a system that allows racial bias to override evidence, procedure, and common sense. If we can't protect someone like Raymond Cross, we've failed at the most basic requirement of justice: equal treatment under law. The op-ed went viral. Conservative and liberal commentators, rarely in agreement, both condemned the detention. Law enforcement experts pointed out the multiple violations of procedure. Legal scholars discussed the constitutional implications. And ordinary Americans looked at the footage of Raymond in handcuffs and saw themselves, or their fathers, or their sons. The pressure became insurmountable. 6 weeks after the detention, the Metropolitan Police Department held a press conference that marked a turning point. Police Chief Amanda Rivera didn't make excuses. She didn't hide behind procedure or investigations still pending. She did something rare in modern law enforcement. She told the truth. Dr. Raymond Cross was wronged. His civil rights were violated. And our department failed him at every level. The officers who detained him acted without justification, ignored proper verification procedures, and allowed their biases to override their professional judgment. The supervisors who could have ended his detention with a single phone call failed to act. And the institutional culture that allowed this to happen has failed the residents of this city. Effective immediately, Officers Brennan and Chun have been suspended without pay pending termination proceedings. Sergeant Morrison has been demoted and reassigned. And I am implementing sweeping reforms to ensure this never happens again. Those reforms were comprehensive. Mandatory training on recognizing and respecting federal credentials, a direct hotline for immediate verification of government IDs, body cameras that cannot be deactivated during any public interaction, automatic review of any detention lasting more than 30 minutes without charges, a civilian oversight board with subpoena power to investigate complaints, public quarterly reports on stops, detentions, and their demographic breakdown. But Rivera went further. She invited Raymond to help design new training protocols. She committed to town halls in communities that had complained about profiling. And she acknowledged something that police departments rarely admit. This wasn't about a few bad officers. This was about a culture that has tolerated racial bias for too long. Changing that culture will take more than policy. It will take humility, accountability, and a willingness to hear hard truths from the communities we serve. Raymond's civil lawsuit, filed in May 2024, sought not just financial compensation but structural change. The settlement, reached in August, included $4.7 million in damages, split between Raymond, $2.2 million, and a fund supporting other victims of similar detention, $2.5 million. But more importantly, it included provisions requiring the police department to maintain the reforms for at least 5 years, with independent monitoring and public reporting. The 3 officers involved faced different outcomes. Brennan and Chun were terminated and are now the subject of federal civil rights charges. Morrison, who had the authority to end the detention but chose not to, was demoted and placed on probation, a compromise Raymond reluctantly accepted because Morrison, unlike the others, had eventually processed his release. But perhaps the most significant outcome wasn't in courtrooms or policy documents. It was in conversations happening across America, in homes, schools, workplaces, and police departments. Jordan wrote an essay about the experience for his English class that was published in the Washington Post. Titled, "Watching My Hero Get Handcuffed," it included this passage, "My dad teaches me about right and wrong. He teaches me to respect authority, to follow rules, to be honest, and work hard. He teaches me that if you do all those things, the system will treat you fairly." On March 8th, I learned that my dad was wrong. The system doesn't treat you fairly just because you follow the rules. The system treated my dad like a criminal, even though he'd spent his whole life protecting the country those officers claimed to serve. And the reason was simple: my dad is black. I watched my hero get handcuffed, And I understood for the first time that in America, being a hero doesn't protect you from racism. The essay went viral. It was read in congressional hearings. It became part of training materials at police academies. And it forced Americans to confront the question, what do we tell our children when the system fails to live up to its promises? Today, Raymond Cross still works in national security. He still advises on counterterrorism strategy. He still holds one of the highest clearances in government. And he still carries the same federal credentials that were dismissed as probably fake by officers who couldn't see past their own biases. But he also carries something else: the knowledge that no credential, no achievement, no amount of service to country can fully shield you from systemic racism. That's a burden no one should have to carry. And it's a reality millions of Americans live with every single day. The reforms implemented in Washington, D.C. have become a model for other jurisdictions. 17 cities have adopted similar protocols for verifying government credentials. Federal agencies have updated their guidance on what state and local police should do when encountering federal officials. And police departments across the country are finally confronting the uncomfortable truth that proper procedure means nothing if officers are allowed to override it based on racial bias. But we can't stop there. Because for every Raymond Cross whose story makes headlines, there are thousands of others whose stories never get told. For every detention captured on video, there are countless others that happen in the shadows. And for every reform implemented under public pressure, there are departments still operating under the old playbooks that prioritize power over justice. This is where you come in. Because change doesn't happen just because one person fights back. It happens because millions of people decide that the status quo is unacceptable. It happens because ordinary citizens demand accountability from the institutions that serve them. It happens because we refuse to look away when injustice is caught on camera. So here's what I'm asking you to do. If this story made you angry, made you think, made you realize that the system is broken, share it. Don't let it disappear into the endless scroll of content. Share it with someone who needs to understand why these issues matter. Share it with someone who thinks racial profiling isn't real. Share it with someone who has the power to make changes in their community. Drop a comment telling me about your own experiences with law enforcement, good or bad. Tell me what reforms you want to see in your city. Tell me what gives you hope that we can do better. Hit that like button if you believe that credentials shouldn't matter, that every person deserves to be treated with dignity, whether they're a deputy secretary or a teenager playing basketball. And subscribe to this channel, because we're committed to telling the stories that matter, to holding power accountable, and to believing that America can finally live up to its promise of equal justice under law. Raymond Cross's detention lasted 74 minutes. But the movement for accountability it sparked is just beginning. And you, right now, watching this video, you're part of that movement. Let's make sure it doesn't stop here.